Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts podcast presented by Keeping Karlsson. I am your host, Louis Ezekiel. Joining me today, Elon Dubois. Elon, how's it going, bud?
What a swerve. I'm back, baby. I just did a show with Brian. I feel like we just finished it. It was such a long show, but here we are, ready for a short shift. And yeah, already a lot to talk about with just a couple days of action.
Yeah, luckily we have a very deep bench here on the Keeping Karlsson podcast network. All right, well, let's get right into it. We'll start with the somber stuff. We had some unpleasant news coming out of Chicago. Really horrible situation. We're glad to see certainly some accountability in terms of the leadership of the Blackhawks team that, basically turned a blind eye to some of this behavior that was taking place. It's just a start, really, to the cultural problems that permeate hockey and sports in general. But we're at least happy to see things moving in the right direction. I put up a statement with Ben's approval on @ShortShiftsKK if you want to hear about sort of our overall thinking. Hockey and fantasy hockey should be for everyone, so we appreciate especially the ongoing and very thoughtful discussion among our patrons on the subject. They've really taken a kind of clear-eyed and open-minded approach, which has been really interesting to sort of see that debate develop. But from there, we'll move on. We also had some COVID news out of Chicago, and this is where we start to actually see some fantasy impact. Jonathan Toews and Henrik Borgstrom were held out of practice today, Tuesday, for COVID protocol, and the COVID list in Chicago now includes that pair along with Kane, Stillman, Kyra, and 3 coaches. I don't know how you feel about this, Elon. All of them, to me, are droppable except Kane, in my opinion. And you talked about this with Brian earlier. I would not be starting Fleury anytime soon. I don't know if I would even be holding him on my roster at all, unless I was in a very deep league where goalies were few and far between.
Yeah, Marc-Andre Fleury is very concerning right now. Like, we thought going into the season it might be a little bit tough for him in a different situation outside of Vegas. And, Lankinen is there. And there was that game where it looked like Lankinen was going to get the start. But then in the end, Fleury did get the start. And I wonder if afterwards Carlton thought, maybe I made the wrong call there. Or maybe they would have lost big either way. But yeah, rough situation now with the COVID. Though, I don't know, like Pittsburgh seems to do well when all their star players are injured. So who knows? Maybe now Chicago's going to actually pull off a win with a top line of who would it even be? Maybe Tyler Johnson finally gets his way back into the top 6 because there's just no other options. But yeah, I don't really think there's much you can do here. Like, I don't even think I'd recommend streaming in a Chicago player who gets into a good spot because it just doesn't seem like this team has got it going right now. And I'd rather just stream from another team. And aside from maybe like Seth Jones, DeBrincat, Patrick Kane, maybe Kubalik and, Toews as the next tier. After that, there's really nothing of fantasy value over there.
Yeah, maybe a more interesting one, and we'll definitely get back to that game that Fleury surprise started, much to Fleury owners' dismay probably, because we've got some Red Wings to talk about. But here is a team where the COVID news is maybe a little more interesting and valuable for us. Ryan O'Reilly was added to the COVID list. That's a bit of a hit because I know you and I both have Ryan O'Reilly in a variety of leagues. The coaches believe he'll be out for a full 10 days, which would mean 4 games, next available on November 7th at Anaheim. He joins Brandon Saad, who is out as well. We don't have lines updated yet, so we have to make some assumptions. Make sure you're checking at Game Day Lines to get the latest. But my guess would be that Schenn would move up to be the line 1 center, or else he might be leapfrogged by Robert Thomas to keep Schenn with Kyrou or Buchnevich. In either case, it seems likely that Thomas is getting a nice winger upgrade, whether it's as the line 1 center or the line 2 center. That may also be an opportunity for Kyrou or Buchnevich to get onto power play 1, as long as they're comfortable with Schenn taking faceoffs. What do you think about the changes in St. Louis?
Yeah, it's interesting. Here, there's definitely going to be some fantasy impacts. The thing is that Robert Thomas has been doing a decent job lately centering Vladimir Tarasenko, who scored that beautiful goal in the last game, a little nutmeg, as they call it. Robert Thomas has 5 assists now on the season in his last 4 games. So he's heating up. I wonder if you almost don't want to split him from Tarasenko, and if you don't want to split Schenn from Buchnevich, and the next thing you know, who is going to center? Because the thing is, when we say the top line, it's like Saad, like you said, is on the COVID list. It started as Ryan O'Reilly, Perron, and Saad. So it's basically just Perron. Maybe you just put Perron with Tarasenko and Robert Thomas and move Barbashev or whoever down the line. So I think it'll be interesting to see how things shake out, but potentially keep your eye on Robert Thomas, because I do agree with you that he's probably going to be getting more minutes, potentially power play time. So for a short-term stream, he could potentially be pretty valuable.
Yeah, Klim Kostin was the other guy getting some run up in that kind of amorphous top 6 in St. Louis, too. So just another kind of interesting player to keep an eye on. And in Pittsburgh, just a quick update. Nothing major since things are remaining more or less the same as they have been. Jeff Carter is still out, but is asymptomatic, and the coaches think he could be cleared by the weekend's games. Chris Letang is a little more concerning because he is symptomatic. So watch for updates. But Wheeler has been in a similar situation. Has been absent for 10 days already. And, unlike some of these other players who are inching closer to returning, we really don't know when we're going to see Wheeler again. So certainly concerning for those Letang folks who drafted him, maybe as their first defenseman. John Marino offering certainly some interesting deployment here for as long as Letang is going to be out.
Yeah, Pittsburgh right now is losing 3-0 to Tampa after 2 periods. So maybe the magic is finally wearing off, or maybe just Tampa's a very good team and Andrei Vasilevsky's a very good goalie. But yeah, there's just been so many names of players like this. There's someone named Drew O'Connor who I hadn't even heard of, and he's been red hot. I guess that's what happens when Rust and Crosby and Malkin and all these people are out. But we'll have to wait and see how Pittsburgh is able to now adjust to even more injuries and more players on the COVID list, like you say, Jeff Carter. But as of now, you brought up Erod with Ben on the last show. He's been good.
I knew you were going to say that.
I guess Pittsburgh is one of those teams where if you're in a super deep league and you're doing streams, I've seen Brian added Jason Zucker in a league. He's someone who we'd kind of left for dead last year in fantasy, but he's been doing decently lately. So Pittsburgh adds Tampa today, then they go Calgary on Thursday, and then New Jersey on Saturday. And hey, New Jersey, by the way, that would be the potentially sweet matchup because if their goalies are both still injured, then they might be letting in a lot of goals just like they did today to Calgary. So maybe that's a good day to stream in some Penguins.
Yeah, and just quickly, it does seem like Crosby's return is approaching. He's been doing some face-off work. He's been doing some work banging around in the corners at practice. So really testing out to see how ready that wrist is to go. We don't have a timetable on that, but certainly something to keep an eye on. You mentioned the Flames. We've got to talk about probably the hottest player in the NHL right now. Our next player doesn't want to help make the bread. He only wants to eat the bread. Andrew Mangiapane is not about the health per life so far this season, but he is eating well. Before Tuesday night's game, he already had 5 goals in 5 games on 16 shots, and he has added at least 2 more. Certainly by the time you hear this recording, we'll know if we are, we're had a successful hat trick watch here for Mangiapane. Dave from Stream Scheme, just another total outstanding pick with Mangiapane. Hopefully you listened. He has 4 goals in the last 2 games against the Rangers, and then tonight, Tuesday night, against the Devils. This is another hot start that I think you may want to trade him into something more valuable. I'm not really confident he'll be able to keep up this. I mean, obviously he's not going to be able to keep up this pace, but even something approaching this pace when he's seeing most of his even strength time with Dylan Dubé and some combination of Brett Ritchie and the ghost of Sean Monahan and seeing power play 2 time. What do you think we should do with Mangiapane here?
I mean, I don't want to pull O'Brien and be a super wet blanket or bucket of cold water type of guy. But yeah, obviously if you streamed him in, great. If you're listening to Dave's advice and actually streaming in the players he suggests, you're probably doing pretty well with those bottom spots on your roster. But at the end of the day, Mangiapane has been scoring 2 goals on 2 shots so far today against New Jersey. He had 2 goals on 3 shots the previous game against the Rangers, a goal on 2 shots. He's not taking a lot of shots and he's scoring goals, which is really cool. And you could say, wow, he just has such a great skill of having great aim and being a sharpshooter, but more likely it's unsustainable production. Keep in mind also he's not getting the primo deploymento. Who's he even playing with? Let me just bring this up here. But I believe he's playing with Dubé and Brett Ritchie. So it's not as if he's getting the top line. He's not on the top power play. So yeah, if you can just reward yourself, congratulate yourself on the great stream if you grabbed him, and then try to trade him for someone that might be more of a season-long hold, that'd be great. And worst comes to worst, if you have to just drop him, you could probably do that too, but at the same time, enjoy it for now. And I guess, good for him. He's a good player. I've seen over the last couple of years, people talk about how, this Mangiapane, he's not nothing. He's a good player. Maybe if Calgary gave him a really, good opportunity, maybe he'd really be able to flourish. But that top line of Lindholm, Gaudreau, and Tkachuk, that's a really good line, and they've been doing really well. And it doesn't seem like Monahan, there's not good supporting people for Mangiapane to play outside of that top line. So I really don't see the success continuing, but pretty cool.
Yeah, and Lindholm has been on a heater himself. He's got 7 points, I think, in the last 6 games, has been playing really outstanding, but also shooting just unsustainably high. Ben couldn't be here today, but a patron asked in the Discord group for some suggestions for someone that he might be able to flip Mangiapane for, even before this 2-goal outburst here on Tuesday. And just off the top of his head, Ben listed a few people, Bennett, Fiala, Marchessault, Barzal, Norris, O'Reilly, Hurdle as possible trade targets with more sustainable deployment and more production. So, get out there and strike while the iron is hot. Obviously, you want to enjoy having this guy. It makes you seem like a genius, but you'll feel like even more of a genius once he cools off and you've secured someone better.
Yeah, I mean, that list you just said, any of those trades would be insane. If you're able to flip Mangiapane for a Kevin Fiala, you're laughing. And yeah, Elias Lindholm, sure, maybe a little unsustainable. He's not going to be a 100-point player, most likely, but he's getting great deployment. Today, he just scored a power play goal assisted by Gaudreau and Rasmus Andersson. That's the place you want to be on Calgary. It's not even like before where Elias Lindholm was playing with Monahan and Gaudreau. That used to be the best spot. This is an even better spot. He's playing with Tkachuk and Gaudreau and on that top power play. So it's really good. Though I guess keep in mind also New Jersey is playing with Nigel Dawes, who got pulled, and now Scott Wedgwood is in net. So it's not exactly the toughest opposition, but not to take away from Calgary's success so far today.
Yeah, no, that's why we say, take advantage while you've got the opportunity here. All right, another group that has just been on fire lately, and in large part with some help from some shoddy goaltending and play from Chicago, but the Red Wings. Really exciting in Detroit for myself, especially, certainly as a Red Wings fan, to have fantasy relevant players to enjoy. A lot of people, myself included, thought that ship had sailed once Vrana was injured for months to start the season. But Lucas Raymond has stepped into that spot and is up to 7 points in 6 games, including a hat trick and an assist against the hapless Blackhawks in a career high 1650 of ice time. Now, once again, like many of our players who are on these early heaters, he won't keep scoring on 25% of his shots, and there's always that fear that Blashill might move him down the lineup, or even that he could be sent back after 3 more games. But I don't see either as particularly likely, especially because he possesses some pretty decent two-way skills that I think will help keep him from making the kind of rookie mistakes that infuriate coaches. So hopefully we are seeing Raymond, make his permanent appearance up here in the top 6 for Detroit, even once Vrana gets back. Makes for some very exciting times in Detroit. Dylan Larkin as well is benefiting from Raymond's finishing. He recorded 3 assists in that game against Chicago to bring him to 5 points in 5 games. Also unlikely to maintain this pace, but when he's getting the assists, it's a little less shocking maybe than when every, fourth shot that he's taking on goal is going in. And I think that his chances of returning to that 60 to 70 point, level are definitely seem more within reach, are greatly improved after a pretty dismal season last year.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe we also underrated the contributions that Tyler Bertuzzi made to Larkin's success, right? Because Bertuzzi missed all of last season. That was Larkin's worst season. And now Bertuzzi also on fire. And you were able to probably draft him for pennies on the dollar, especially because the news came out that he wasn't going to be playing any of the games in Canada because he didn't get vaccinated. So I'm sure people were, even more averse to drafting him in their fantasy drafts. But man, he's got now 9 points in 5 games. 2 of his 5 games have been 3 or more points. He had that 4-goal game to start the season, now a goal and 2 assists in that game against Chicago. So yeah, Tyler Bertuzzi looking really good with Larkin and with Lucas Raymond. All 3 of them are great, and this is just one of those teams where any other line is doing absolutely nothing. I've got Pew Suter in my Dynasty League, and I was like, this is probably going to be a pretty decent situation for him in the top 6 on Detroit. No, every single goal scored by the top line. I don't even think, does Pew Suter even have a point yet this season? He's playing with Fabry and Zadina, and no, nothing for Suter. So what am I doing with this guy? He's going to lose his minors eligibility soon in my league format, and I feel like I'm definitely going to be dropping him before I take on that $3.5 million contract unless something changes soon. Maybe when Vrana comes back, if then Suter can play with Raymond. Once you start thinking like that, it's just forget it. This guy's probably not going to help me that much.
So yeah, obviously Bertuzzi is shooting far beyond, what we can expect from him this season. He's scoring on almost half of his shots at 6 goals on 14 shots. But what's really nice to see is that the line is really driving play at even strength. They've taken 57% of the shot attempts while they're on the ice. That is similar to lines like Barkov, Reinhart, Verhaeghe, Stamkos, Palat Point, and Duchesne, Johansson, Forsberg. So that's pretty nice company to have. And those lines have been shuffled around a little bit. But, that's the kind of production that you're hoping to see, maybe not sustain this, but at least, keep things moving in the right direction. Mo Sider has also been a revelation for the Wings. He's seeing 55% of the power play time on ice, and he's managed 5 assists in 6 games, including 3 on the power play. He seems likely to maintain about half of that power play time moving forward, especially with Philly Hronek and his fallout with the coaching staff. So Hronek was scratched for a game, and he's back now. But I think we're looking at the ascendance of Mo Sider and Hronek taking kind of a secondary spot here, especially when it comes to power play time. He may see some very diminished returns on that power play time.
Yeah, Brian and I were calling Hronek snoozer on our Patreon cast on Wednesday, then more so on the show on Sunday when he was scratched for a couple of games. So yeah, even if he comes back, I'm not too excited about him. And yeah, Sider, what a fantastic start. Potentially, I don't know, is he the front runner right now for the Calder? I guess there's a few options out there, and I guess Lucas Raymond would be another one. But Detroit, it must be exciting. They have 2 potential Calder winners, and Steve Yzerman, I guess, has never really said that like they've moved from being in a rebuild phase to like a win now phase. I'm not saying that they're in a win now phase, but all of a sudden things are looking pretty good, and I guess we'll see how things shake out. By the way, with Tyler Bertuzzi, I'll just mention quickly, yeah, he has a super high shooting percentage. Just keep in mind that he always has a really high shooting percentage, like maybe not 40%, but this is a guy who last year was shooting 25%. It was only in 9 games. The year before and the year before that 16, which are both much higher than what forwards normally do. So I guess I remember we once did an interview with must have been Prashant Iyer about the Red Wings, and he was saying how Bertuzzi's scoring on a high percentage of his shots because they're like shots from right in front of the net. Like so it's like those shots are going to tend to go in more often. So yeah, I think Bertuzzi is going to be someone that people are going to be very happy with for the rest of the year. Just hopefully he stays healthy, right? This is what always happens with Detroit, right? Like Mantha kept on getting injured. Bertuzzi's obviously had this injury troubles. Larkin himself too. So just hopefully everyone stays healthy, and I think you're going to get a lot of fantasy value there. If Lucas Raymond's still out there, obviously grab him. Don't even think twice.
Yeah, pause the show. And just one more note on Bertuzzi's health. maybe like Mackenzie Blackwood did, he'll decide he wants to go ahead and get himself vaccinated so he can continue to chase that, scoring title here. So we might see him change his mind and go ahead and get vaxxed up so we can play those games in Canada. All right, we're going to take a short break here, hear a word from our sponsors, and then we will get to Winnipeg, Toronto, and Dallas. You are listening to Short Shifts. All right, welcome back to Short Shifts. Elon, you and Brian spent a little bit of time talking about Marner on the last episode, and we saw lines get shaken up a little bit in Toronto. What's going on up there?
Yeah, so on Sunday's show, Brian and I were talking about how, Marner's had this really slow start, and, we're not going to be too concerned, especially because now he's, playing with Matthews, and Matthews had come back from injury, and Matthews in his first 3 games had taken so many shots and nothing had gone in, and I was saying, yeah, well, if Matthews scores a couple of those goals, I'll bet you that Marner would have had assists on them, and then we'd be feeling a little bit differently. Now, all of a sudden, that line of thinking doesn't really hold because Marner is no longer playing with Matthews. In the last game, it was Matthews playing with William Nylander and Michael Bunting on the top line, and then Marner was shuffled to play with Tavares and Alex Kerfoot. And no shade to John Tavares, he's an amazing player, but he wasn't taking 17 shots in 3 games like Matthews is. So not to sound the alarm bells too much, and hey, the Leafs lost to Carolina, so who knows if Keefe is going to shift around the lines a little bit again, but I'm going to definitely be a little bit more bearish on Mitch Marner being able to reach those heights from last year if he's away from Austin Matthews. So while before Brian was talking about all the funny ways that people have been able to buy low on Mitch Marner, maybe hold back a little bit. We were talking about Svechnikov versus Marner on Sunday show, and maybe I'm the more alarmist person, but Brian was saying he would still take Marner because it's 2 weeks ago we were all drafting Marner higher than Svechnikov, so why all of a sudden change our mind? But I don't know. After watching that game yesterday of the Leafs against the Canes, I think I'd rather have the guy that scored a goal and an assist and was on the top line and on the top power play playing with Sebastian Aho, as opposed to the guy playing with Tavares and Kerfoot and still doing nothing. And that even when he's at his best, Marner's not taking a ton of shots, right? We really just need those assists for him to be productive. So if you're not in a points-only league, I feel like maybe if other people are going to be coming at you with their buy low propositions, thinking that they're going to get one over on you, maybe you let them think they're getting one over on you, but actually you're selling Marner. I don't know. Again, I don't want to be too alarmist to the people who have Marner, but I'm obviously very concerned if he's away from Matthews. So let's see how long that lasts.
Yeah, I do think that it's going to be kind of temporary. We certainly, had high hopes at the beginning of the season, obviously Matthews is out, but at least Tavares is there and he's going to be fine and he and Marner will do all right together. Obviously that didn't happen. it's a double-edged sword, right? Because if the people who have Marner see him start to score when he's with Tavares, you're like, oh, well, that's good. But also maybe that means that Marner is destined for more of that second line time. But honestly, if anything can get going in Toronto, I think that's going to be a sign of things moving in the right direction. It is worrisome in there.
Yeah, also, let's just point out, Michael Bunting playing with Matthews and Nylander is a very sweet, sweet spot, and he's also on the second power play. Get your hands on Michael Bunting if you can. I'll take Lucas Raymond higher, but if you could have Bunting out there, and he's likely available in more of your leagues, I think now's the time to pounce. He might turn out to be a season-long hold. He may have just seemed like one of these players. You know, there's always, like, every year in fantasy, there's these random players who get in a good line. Like, don't look any further than Nick Ritchie, who was playing with Matthews and Marner, and we thought that would be a good spot, and obviously he fell off, and I think forget about him, but this Michael Bunting, to me, he seems like he is for real-ish. Like, I'm not going to guarantee to you that you need to, like, you know, drop someone amazing for him and he's going to be a guaranteed hold all year. But at this point, I would grab him. And if he has, like, a bad game, I'm not just, like, dropping him and going to my next streamer. Like, I would want to wait for him to have, you know, 2 or 3 bad games in a row and or obviously be bumped from the top 6. But he's looking really good so far this season. Another assist on Monday on that one goal that was scored by Austin Matthews. And I'm sure Marner managers were like, that should have been my assists. I've been waiting for Matthews to score to get the Marner. No, it was Bunting who was able to pick up that apple.
Well, you know you're working with a true professional when you totally read my mind about the player comparison I want to ask you. So way to jump on that Raymond versus Bunting. I love it. Let's head over to Winnipeg and talk about a player who has really picked it up. Pierre-Luc Dubois really seems to have shaken the transition struggles that plagued him upon arrival in Winnipeg. He's put together 6 points, 4 goals, 2 assists with 3 power play points so far this season and is seeing all of his even strength time with either Connor or Ehlers. You'd love to see that. What remains to be seen is whether he'll be able to maintain his even strength deployment and production when Scheifele and Wheeler return. He's already seen his power play time diminish significantly in the last 2 games. He was over 50% the first 3, and then he's been down below 20% in the last 2. I am hoping that maybe part of that lack of time in the second game might be due to assisting on a goal after limited power play time, but definitely something to monitor, especially as Winnipeg moves back to full strength. This is another hot starter that you could maybe get out there and offer a trade for. What do you think? Is PLD sustainable, or is this production fleeting?
I would say fleeting, and here's why. He has goals in each of his last 3 games. He actually has goals in each of his last 4 games. That's pretty great. Until you look at in those last 3 games, each of them he had 1 shot, and he just happened to score on that shot. So this is like a Mangiapane situation to me. Like, obviously Dubois has a higher pedigree than Mangiapane, and maybe I'd like him a little better than him, just because also PLD, like you said, is playing in a better spot in the lineup. So I don't mean to compare them exactly, but when I see 3 goals on his last 3 shots, that's how we started keeping Karlsson. Was like, the first thing we're going to look at in terms of sustainable or fleeting is let's see how many shots and how many goals. And he's not a Bertuzzi. He's not known. PLD is not known to be someone with a super high shooting percentage. Last couple of years he's been around like 11-12%. So I think that this is if you have him, I'm definitely not recommending to drop him or to like just give him away for nothing. But again, like those names that you rhymed out that Ben suggested to trade Mangiapane for, I don't think you'll be able to get a hit on those. But maybe for PLD, you might get more of a bite because he used to be like a star in the league a couple of years ago. You know, he had that great 61-point season back in 2018-19. So if you can get, a Ryan O'Reilly, Kevin Fiala, I forget some of those other names you said, but I would definitely take a lot of those deals because he's not going to be scoring on every single shot he takes. Like, if anything, you're a little bit concerned with only 8 shots in 5 games. So it's kind of like what Brian was saying about Connor Garland on the last show, which I don't know. I find it a little hard to agree with Brian just because I feel bad about trading away Connor Garland. And so I feel like I don't want to become too comfortable with like, oh yeah, he's going to totally bust. But like, obviously, you want a player to be shooting a little bit more if you want him to have sustainable goal scoring.
Yeah, you want to root for those players you trade away to do well so that people want to trade with you in the future, right?
True.
And yeah, absolutely. I think you send your trade partners to Frozen Tools and tell them to look at those most common line mates and show them, obviously that PLD is not playing with nobodies like Dubois or Sean Monahan. So I think that can make for a really appealing sell.
Can I ask you a question about Winnipeg? I want to get your opinion. I've been seeing on Yahoo that Nate Schmidt is like the most added player in like all of my leagues because he's still a free agent in all of my leagues. And I guess you can see why, because he has 6 points now in his last 3 games. 1 assist, then 2 assists, then 3 assists. I think that means he's going to get 4 assists tonight in the game against Anaheim if the pattern holds. So are we like super excited about Nate Schmidt now? Like, aside those, by the way, all these 3 games, one of those points has been a power play point. Not like too many shots. shots, actually like 0 shots in each of his last couple of games, 2 or 1 block. He's not like killing it in peripherals or anything, but he's, picking up assists. He's doing what Mitch Marner can't do. So are we into him? Like I saw, actually, Lewis, we're competitors in Tier 1 a couple, and Josh Morrissey was just dropped recently. He's going to be coming off waivers, I believe, tomorrow. So I don't want you to give too much away, but like if you had to choose between Morrissey and Nate Schmidt, they're both like on the same pairing. They're both playing on the same power play. Like they're basically getting equivalent deployment. Nate Schmidt's the one who's been getting more points lately, but obviously Morrissey's the one who was a lot more valuable last year. I shouldn't say a lot more valuable, but definitely someone that was on more rosters. So who's the Winnipeg defenseman that you go for between the two?
So I think it should be clear that if I was interested in Nate Schmidt, I probably would have gone after him by this point. He is sitting there in free agency, and it's because I like to take your sort of approach in terms of players. I want to see them shooting, especially with the value that our league puts on shots. So that lack of shooting was really a concern for me. I am heartened a little bit to see that he's getting all of his even strength. All 3 assists he's scored at even strength have been primary assists. So that's good to see. He's not just kind of lucking into some of these. And actually, his power play assists have been primary assists, too. He does have 100% IPP on the power play, which is maybe a little bit concerning. But if he is kind of taking on that QB role, maybe that's really interesting. This was one of the guys who came over in the offseason, and we thought that maybe he will make things a little more exciting for Winnipeg and sort of help them out defensively. But he's providing some offense here. Overall, though, I think I'm more inclined towards Morrissey. I don't know if I'm going to end up putting in a bid for him or looking for someone to drop, but I just feel like, this lack of shooting is concerning. But I love these primary assists. I don't know. I'm really right in the middle. I'm going to cop out and say I can't really pick between them. It's a pretty interesting situation that maybe I'm just going to ultimately monitor for a bit longer before I drop anyone of relevance.
Yeah, you might lose your chance to pick them up. It probably won't mean that much because it's not Neil Pionk on the top power play either way. Morrissey's also doing well, by the way. He's got 3 points in his last 4 games, 2 of them goals. So, yeah, nice to see some value out of Winnipeg. I guess people listening to this will know how they did against Anaheim tonight. I've got Adam Henrique, who I just streamed in today, to unfortunately replace Ryan O'Reilly, who I put on the IR. Henrique and the Ducks play on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So I'm thinking I'll take the 3 games in 4 days, and hopefully the guy playing with Raquel and Zegras is able to give me a point or 2 over these next 3 days, not make me regret it.
Yeah, I picked up a pretty hot Troy Terry in the keeper league that we are in together that Ben is running. So I'm also hoping for a little Anaheim magic here. Elon, let's head to our last team of the day. We want to talk a little bit about Dallas, where we've got some line shuffling and an interesting ouchery.
Yeah, so finally, John Klingberg is back after missing a few games after that first game of the season. Not a very exciting return for Klingberg, unfortunately, versus Columbus when the Blue Jackets beat Dallas 4-1. Klingberg played 20 minutes and 39 seconds. Only 2 of those minutes were on the power play, where he only saw around 37% of the time. So Heiskanen was on that top power play unit, but no points for Klingberg. I mean, Dallas only scored 1 goal in that game, 2 shots, a hit, and a block. So I obviously will expect that Klingberg will still, be someone that you're going to want to have in your roster. This is a guy who pays for 56 points last year, though Dallas does not seem to be the high-scoring team that they were for a lot of last season. So far, a lot of busts on this team. Tyler Seguin, more recently, he has 3 points in his last couple of games, so maybe he's starting to heat up. But you've got your Pavelskis, your Hintzes, Ben, Radulov, all with those frost icons on Frozen Tools when you look at if the player is hot or cold, and they're all cold. So not looking really good for any of these guys. I guess Guryanov got on a decent line and scored a goal recently, but still we're looking at a guy with 1 goal in 6 games. I know you wanted to say something about Guryanov because you tweeted about him, but overall, not looking good. I feel like we're all just like waiting for Jason Robertson to come back and hopefully spur this team to become better at scoring some goals.
Yeah, they need something because it has been pretty dismal. Rick Bowness even came out and said he had no plan B for how the lines were going to be set up, meaning he was not going to shuffle them regardless of what happened. He did end up shuffling the lines just a little bit, but maybe some Guryanov optimism there. The Dallas Athletic article this morning said that his play was one of the bright spots. Once the lines were shuffled, he moved from a line with Hintz and Pavelski to a line with Ben and Radulov. So that's a pretty good landing spot after the shuffle. He had 4 shots, 4 hits, and a block. And if not for a really outstanding tip of the glove save by Merzlikins, who just was playing out of his mind in that game, he would have had a goal to show for it too. So I've still got a little bit of confidence for Gurianov, an interesting stream. If you haven't picked him up yet, he still has Wednesday, Friday games this week, although none of the days until Saturday are especially busy. So I don't know how important those off days are, but just someone to keep an eye on there.
I guess you can keep an eye on Gurianov if you're in that super deep league, but I honestly feel like a lot of the listeners are more wanting to get our opinions on like Pavelski, Ben, Hintz, Radulov, like the actual players they might have on their teams. They're like, how long do I hold on to these guys? Like Rupi Hintz last year was like over a point per game. The only problem was he was just injured all the time, but whenever he did, and it was like in a frustrating way where you never knew until like a minute before the game was going to start whether he was going to play or not, but he ended up with 43 points in 41 games. He's got 1 assist in 6 games. He has 13 shots in 6 games. That's like just barely over 2 shots per game, which actually is the same as his shot rates from last year. So I don't know, like, would you... It's hard to just answer because obviously you need to have some more context and everything. But like, are you expecting all these guys that I've mentioned, like basically except for Tyler Seguin, who started to heat up, all these other Dallas guys? Is there anyone in particular that you're expecting will be able to bounce back and be worth rostering? Like Jamie Benn was just dropped in Tier 1 of Cupful today, and I was looking at him like, am I going to add him? Like, I don't know. He's not doing anything all season. He has 1 assist in 6 games as well. And not that many shots. Like, what am I seeing here? Jamie Benn, 10 shots in 6 games. So, yeah, less than 2 shots a game. Like, am I really going to drop someone that I like to pick up Jamie Benn?
Yeah, I think I'm out on Ben. You know, we've been talking about how players who use his style, you know, they burn out a little quicker. Those big power forwards. I've been out on Ben for a while, but, you know, even kicking around, especially with the way these lines are getting shuffled, I just don't see it. I guess Hintz is the one I'm most interested in. He had some, you know, great chemistry last year with some of these guys, and hopefully we, like you said, we'll have Robertson coming back before too long to give a little bit of spark to this offense. But no, it's been pretty rough, and, you know, I think Rick Bowness might be coaching for his job in the near future. So he's going to be forced to make some decisions about how he wants to deploy these units, and they may be pretty interesting. And like we saw, he already wasn't able to stick to his plan to, you know, not change anything about his line. So I don't know. I'm not seeing it. It looks pretty grim. I maybe am just staying away.
Yeah, I think I may agree with you. I guess tweeted us at Keeping Carlson at Short Shifts KK. Let us know if you have a player that you're eyeing. If let's say you have Pavelski or Hintz or Ben or Radulov or one of these guys and you're thinking of dropping them, let us know like sort of like the type of player you're dropping them for, and then we'll be able to give you advice on whether we would hold on or if we would finally pull the trigger and let the player go.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Elon, well, we are getting to the end of a short shift where our coach is standing on the bench hollering at us to get off the ice. So we're going to wrap things up here. Thank you all so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to be able to bring you some fantasy hockey goodness here in the middle of the week. Please patronize the sites that we use for our research. Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Game Day Lines tweets were big for us today. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.
I don't know why the coach is hollering at us. Like, I'm not gassed. I could keep going.